At my son's engagement party, I showed up early with a small gift and a quiet smile. His bride leaned in and said, clear enough for the table to hear, "You shouldn't even be here." My son stared at his plate. The room spun. But I held my breath, dignity first. That night, I called every vendor, the flowers, the band, the venue, every check with my name on it, canceled. I saved the receipts, the emails, the uncropped photos. The next morning, her lawyer tried to scare me with guardianship papers. I walked into court with a folder and one question: who forged my initials? Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from. The cobblestone streets of Charleston still held the warmth of the day as the evening breeze carried the faint scent of salt from the harbor. Lanterns flickered above the waterfront hall, strung in neat rows that shimmered against the water's darkening surface. Guests in press suits and cocktail dresses laughed as they walked past me, their polished shoes clicking on the stone walkway. I had arrived early, holding a modestly wrapped box, a small gift for my son and his fiancée. It wasn't much compared to the extravagance surrounding me, but it was chosen carefully, a gesture of love more than wealth. Stepping through the doors, I paused for a moment to take in the scene. The room glittered with string lights draped across wooden beams, the kind of charm Charleston was known for. The sight stirred a quiet hope inside me. Maybe tonight could be a new beginning, a way of being closer to Dean. "Sir, deliveries go through the back," a young staff member said as I crossed the threshold. She eyed the box in my hand, mistaking me for someone dropping off supplies. Her words landed like a pebble in the chest, small but sharp. I gave her a thin smile and shook my head. "I'm here for the party," I told her, but she had already turned away to greet another guest. I walked deeper into the hall, pushing down the sting. It was nothing, I told myself, just a mistake. Still, the echo of the comment lingered as I searched for my seat. Tables lined the center of the room, white cloths trimmed with gold. Each place setting bore a handwritten card in elegant script. Mr. Mrs. Whitley, Dr. and Mrs. Palmer, Mr. Mrs. Kingsley. I circled slowly, looking for my name. None appeared. "Excuse me," I asked a passing attendant. "Where might my seat be?" He glanced at a clipboard and pointed toward the back, near the bar where the hum of ice against glass was constant. My chair, if you could call it that, was tucked against the wall, far from the head table where Marla's parents sat prominently, smiling at every introduction. My chest tightened. I had paid for nearly all of this, the flowers, the band, even the very lights that sparkled overhead. Yet here I was, placed where no one would notice. I lowered myself into the seat, swallowing the bitterness. Pride ached, but silence was safer than a scene. The laughter from the main table rolled over me, a reminder of the distance that had formed between myself and my own son. When the formal introductions began, I stood, brushing my jacket straight. Marla swept through the room in a shimmering gown, her smile as polished as the diamonds at her ears. She embraced her parents, kissed distant relatives, laughed warmly with neighbors. When her eyes met mine, the smile cooled, a perfunctory nod. Then she turned away as if I were part of the decor. Her voice, light as a blade, carried just enough for nearby guests to hear. "Some people just don't know when their time has passed." A few chuckles escaped from those standing close, awkward and clipped, but enough to burn in my ears. The words struck harder than the staff's mistake, harder than the empty seat. They painted me as obsolete, a relic in a room I had helped create. Humiliation tightened my throat, but I forced my hands to stay steady. In that moment, Elaine's voice whispered in memory, the calm, steady tone of my late wife. "Stand with dignity. Lowell, don't give them more than silence." So I stayed seated, listening to the rise and fall of voices, replaying Marla's slight in my mind. The urge to walk out grew heavy, but something colder settled inside instead. Leaving would be surrender. Watching, enduring, would be the sharper weapon. Dinner began, silverware clinking against fine china. Marla leaned slightly toward me as servers placed plates before us. Her perfume was sharp, her smile tighter than glass. You shouldn't even be here, she whispered, her lips barely moving. My fingers closed around the fork until the metal bent slightly. A deep breath steadied me. The corners of my mouth lifted in something resembling a smile. If she wanted me invisible, she had chosen the wrong man. The air outside was warm, the kind of southern night that carried the salt of the harbor and the faint scent of magnolia. A string of lanterns flickered in the courtyard, swaying gently with the breeze. Behind me, the muffled laughter and music from the hall pressed like a reminder that I no longer belonged inside. For a moment, leaning against the iron railing, the thought passed through, maybe it would be easier to leave quietly. Let them celebrate without the awkward shadow of an old man in the corner. But that felt like surrender, and surrender had never been in my nature. The scrape of heels on stone broke the stillness. Marla appeared, a champagne flute dangling carelessly in her hand. Her smile was painted on, the kind of smile meant for spectators. "There you are," she cooed, her voice low but edged. "You don't belong here, Lowell. Dean doesn't need dead weight holding him back." The words cut sharper than I expected. A couple of guests lingered near the fountain, and though they tried not to stare, I could see the way their eyes darted between us. Marla had chosen her moment well, an audience to witness my dismissal. She raised her glass in a mock toast, then added, "It's time you step aside gracefully. You've had your life." A hollow laughter bubbled from one of the guests, awkward and forced. Humiliation burned in my chest, but I kept my face steady. Years of holding back in courtrooms, meetings, and even hospital waiting rooms had taught me one thing: dignity survives silence. Then the doors creaked again, and Dean emerged. Relief flickered inside me. Surely now, faced with his father being mocked, he would step forward. He looked at me briefly, then at Marla, his shoulders stiff. "Dad," he said, voice low, almost pleading, "please don't make a scene." The words landed heavier than Marla's insult. My own son, the boy I had held through fevers, taught to ride a bike, sent to college, now stood before me unwilling to defend his father's name. Instead, he reached for Marla's arm and guided her back inside, their figures swallowed by the golden light of the ballroom. The courtyard was quiet again, except for the splash of the fountain. I stood alone, watching the shadows stretch across the cobblestones. In the silence, Elaine's voice drifted back to me, soft and steady as it had been in life. "Family honor is worth standing for, even when you stand alone. If I walked away tonight, it wouldn't just be from the party. I would be walking away from myself, from every principle I had held." That thought steadied me more than any drink could. I drew a long breath, squared my shoulders, and pushed open the doors. The music hit first, then the scent of rosemary chicken being served at the tables. Conversation stilled for a beat when I entered, as if everyone was waiting to see whether I would slink away or reclaim my place. I made no announcement, no demand. I simply walked back to my seat, slid into the chair, and lifted my water glass as though nothing had happened. Marla's eyes narrowed across the table, but I offered no reaction. Let her think she had won. Let them all think I was harmless, invisible. Inside, though, a shift had begun. The humiliation no longer sat heavy. It simmered, shaping into something colder, sharper. They wanted me erased, but I was learning that silence could be a weapon, too. They want me invisible. The thought pressed firm as I set my glass down. I'll let them think I am, but I'm watching. And when the time comes, I'll act. The night carried on, each toast and each laugh piling insult upon insult, but I sat steady, a man preparing for a longer game. Morning light crept through the lace curtains of the small house, a pale wash of gold that made the silence feel heavier. Sleep had been restless, broken by echoes of Marla's words and the sting of Dean's silence. Pride had been wounded, yes, but deeper than that was the sense that something larger was moving beneath the surface. The photographs on the mantel, Elaine's gentle smile frozen in time, seemed to watch closely, as if asking what would be done next. The old rocking chair by the window, the one she loved, stood still, and the house felt like a sanctuary slowly being trespassed by shadows that came from outside. The phone startled the quiet. Picking it up, Silas Rizzo's voice sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. He was one of the vendors Dean and Marla had hired, the man arranging decor and wine for the big day. After clearing his throat twice, he explained the situation. Expenses were ballooning, far beyond the budget initially discussed. Imported wines had been added, expansive floral arches ordered from New York, custom linens, intricate lights, a band extension, none of which had been approved. Each word from him chipped away at trust. "What are you telling me, Silas?" The tone was calm, but the grip on the receiver tightened. "I thought you should know. Mr. Reichert, Mrs. to be Marla, signed off on the extras. She said you were flexible." Flexible. The word burned. Elaine and he had lived carefully, penny by penny, building a life that was modest but steady. The idea that someone else, someone who had looked straight through him the night before, was signing away his savings was almost laughable, if it weren't so cruel. When the call ended, the house felt smaller. Pacing across the wooden floor, every creak seemed to echo the same truth. He was being cornered. By afternoon, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't a vendor, it was Marla herself. Her tone was bright at first, dripping with a sweetness that didn't fool anyone. "Lowell," she began, "we should make things smoother for Dean. One simple solution: add me to a joint card with you. That way payments don't bottleneck. We all win." Silence stretched before the answer came, deliberate and slow. "That won't happen." The warmth in her voice cracked. "If you care about Dean's future, you'll stop making this difficult." There it was. The mask had dropped. This wasn't about ease, it was about access, about control. And suddenly, the night before made perfect sense. The whisper, the exclusion, Dean's silence, it was all part of the same current pulling harder now. The conversation ended with her abrupt click, but the weight of her demand lingered. Sitting in the study, papers spread across the desk, his fingers brushed old documents, savings ledgers, insurance forms, Elaine's notes from years past. The quiet of the house pressed in. Dean's face at the party surfaced again, eyes lowered, words weak, siding with her. Could he be trusted with this truth now? Elaine's voice seemed to return, not in sound but in memory. Dignity is choosing your silence wisely. Her way had always been one of patience, of careful strength. Was silence weakness now, or was it strategy? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was, silence wouldn't last forever. Hands trembled as the bank folder was lifted, heavy with the life's work of decades. Whispering into the quiet, almost as if to Elaine, the words came, "If I give her this card, I hand her the keys to everything I've built." The phone buzzed again, the sound sharp in the stillness. Another unknown number, likely another vendor tied to the wedding. Suspicion flared, sharper now, mixing with a thread of dread. This was only the beginning. Dean showed up at my doorstep just before sunset, papers tucked under his arm. The September air in Charleston carried a lingering warmth, but he looked stiff, like a man rehearsing lines he didn't believe in. He barely sat before sliding the folder across my table. "Dad," he said softly, "Marla's attorney drew this up. It's just a formality, a prenup that also covers your contributions. It'll make things smoother." The words stung worse than the papers. My own son, treating my years of sacrifice as line items for a stranger's lawyer. My hand hovered over the folder but didn't open it. "I won't sign this," I said, voice steady. "I didn't build a life with your mother so some attorney could dictate what family means." Dean's shoulders slumped. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, please, don't make this harder. Marla says it's just—" I cut him off with a look. "This isn't about Marla. This is about you asking me to treat love like a contract." He left the papers on the table, eyes avoiding mine. The silence stretched until he muttered, "We'll talk later," and walked out into the evening light. The ache in my chest wasn't just anger, it was the sharp edge of disappointment. Elaine would have told me to stand firm, and that thought steadied me. That night, I agreed to meet them for dinner at a small restaurant near the harbor. The place was crowded, laughter spilling from tables, waiters balancing trays of wine. Marla greeted me with a smile sweet enough to fool anyone watching, but her words in private carried venom. "You make everything so complicated," she whispered, as Dean studied the menu. "Dean deserves a future without your stubbornness dragging us back." I forced a polite smile. Not for her, but for the people at nearby tables. Let them see a man calm, not broken. "Family isn't a burden," I replied evenly. Her smile thinned. She leaned back, raising her voice just enough for surrounding ears. "Some people just don't understand change." Dean shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to hear. The humiliation felt familiar now, but sharper, more public. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. A message from Kathy, Marla's bridesmaid. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I opened it. Screenshots from a group chat. My name tossed around like a joke. "The wallet will cover it." Old man doesn't even know what's happening. Just smile and nod. He's too stubborn to matter. I read the words while they laughed over wine and appetizers. My face burned, but I kept my expression even. Dean asked me if I wanted more bread. I nodded quietly, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Humiliation had a weight, but dignity had its own kind of armor. If they wanted a wallet, then I would decide when it opened and when it stayed shut. I finished my meal in silence, each bite deliberate. My mind turned the screenshots over and over, the cruelty dressed as humor. When we left, Marla leaned close, her perfume sharp in the night air. "Soon, you'll see your place," she whispered. My hand tightened around the phone in my pocket. Yes, I thought. And so will everyone else. The Charleston streetlights shimmered on the water, casting long shadows. The evidence I carried wasn't just words on a screen, it was the mask slipping, proof of what she really thought of me. And when the time was right, those words would speak louder than any smile she put on for the world. The phone rang just as the morning sun slipped through the blinds. The number looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. When I answered, the voice on the other end was steady, professional. "Mr. Reichert, this is Eldon Briley, from the Charleston branch. Do you have a moment?" He'd been my loan officer for years, always polite, always routine, but his tone this morning carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "Of course. Eldon, what's going on?" He hesitated, clearing his throat. "Sir, are you aware of a loan application filed recently under your name? It involves significant collateral tied to your assets." The blood drained from my face. "A loan? No, I haven't applied for anything." Silence stretched across the line. Finally, Eldon's voice lowered. "Then I think you need to see what's on file, because your name and signature are on the paperwork." My hand tightened around the receiver. "I never signed a damn thing." "I believe you, Mr. Reichert." "Please, come in as soon as you can. We need to talk in person." The call ended, leaving the house unbearably quiet. The ticking clock on the wall hammered in my ears. The drive downtown was a blur. Charleston's cobblestone streets rolled beneath the tires, lined with tourists and locals going about their morning as if nothing in the world was wrong. The scent of salt air from the harbor drifted in through the open window, but it did nothing to calm me. Eldon met me at the bank door himself, his expression careful, sympathetic. He led me to his office, where manila folders sat stacked neatly on his desk. He slid one toward me. "Here, these are the documents I mentioned." I unfolded the papers, and there it was, my name, scrawled in a signature eerily close to my own. My heart thudded as I studied the pen strokes. The curves mimicked my hand but lacked the subtle hesitations only I would know. "I didn't write this." My voice was sharp, breaking. "I suspected as much." Eldon leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The application was pushed through channels connected to your son and his fiancée. A large loan for wedding-related expenses, risky, aggressive. It raised red flags." My stomach turned. Dean's name, tethered to hers. Marla's fingerprints all over it. They're trying to leverage what little I have left, I muttered, clutching the paper. Eldon nodded solemnly. I'll hold the application until you give me direction, but you need to protect yourself. This, he tapped the forged signature, could get worse. I left the bank with the folder under my arm, the city's noise crashing against me like waves. My chest felt hollow. The car door slammed shut behind me, but I didn't start the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling. Through the windshield, Charleston bustled with its usual rhythm, a horse-drawn carriage clipping down the street, church bells echoing from St. Michael's, children laughing as they tugged their parents along. Life carried on, untouched. Yet my own had shifted beneath my feet. Elaine's face floated into memory. She'd been meticulous with money, saving every receipt, jotting notes in her small ledger. Never sign blind, Lowell, she used to warn, her eyes narrowing when I grew careless. The ache of her absence throbbed deeper than ever. I whispered into the empty car. You were right, Elaine. I should have guarded harder. Humiliation at the party had stung. This was different. This was erasure. That evening, back at home, I sat heavily at the desk. Out of habit, I scrolled through my phone, trying to distract myself. My thumb slipped, and an old voicemail began to play. Her voice. Lowell, promise me you'll protect what we built, no matter who stands against you. Elaine's tone was calm, unshakable, the same way she sounded when she reassured me through layoffs, medical bills, and every storm we faced together. The words cut through me. For a moment, grief pressed so hard I thought I might collapse under it. But then something shifted. The grief straightened into resolve, her voice pushing me upright from within. I replayed it twice, just to feel her there. Each time, the message steadied me more. She hadn't left me defenseless. She'd left me prepared. On the desk lay 2 items, the forged papers from the bank and my phone, still glowing with Elaine's message. I placed them side by side, staring at the cruel contrast, one a theft of identity, the other a reminder of love and trust. You're not just taking my money, I whispered into the stillness. You're trying to erase us both. The fury inside me no longer scattered, it focused. The time for silence was ending. Dean had to see what was happening, even if it shattered him, even if it shattered me. I leaned back in the chair, fists tight, jaw set. For the first time in weeks, my fear burned away, replaced by something steadier. The next step was clear. I would confront my son. Dean's voice had carried a rehearsed steadiness when he called earlier in the week, inviting me to dinner at their townhouse. He'd called it a chance to clear the air, but it rang hollow. The echo of Elaine's saved voicemail was still etched in memory, her urging me to protect what we built. That was the reason I pressed my shirt, polished my shoes, and agreed to sit at their table. The townhouse smelled faintly of garlic and roasted chicken when I arrived, the sort of warmth that used to mean family. Inside, though, the air was brittle. Dean greeted me with a stiff hug, the kind men give when they're ashamed to face the truth. Marla's smile was painted on like it belonged to someone else. The table was set immaculately, silverware glinting under the chandelier. Conversation barely stretched beyond the sound of forks against porcelain. Marla filled the silence, speaking brightly about wine pairings and guest lists, sliding little barbs into her chatter, comments about the old ways and how the world had moved past stubborn traditions. Dean nodded along, eyes lowered, his silence heavier than any insult. I waited until the plates were half full before I set down my fork and slid the folder across the table. Dean looked at me, startled. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof," I said. "From the bank, loan papers with my name forged." He opened the folder, eyes moving across the pages, the familiar loops of my forged signature staring back at him. His face hardened, not in outrage but in disbelief. "Dad, Marla would never do this. There has to be some mistake." "It's no mistake," I said firmly. "I saw the copies myself. Eldon showed me. This is fraud." "Dean." Marla leaned forward, her voice smooth as honey but sharp underneath. "Lowell, you've misunderstood. Wedding planning can be complicated, And sometimes vendors get wires crossed. You're reading too much into it. Dean's eyes darted between us. He shut the folder, pushing it back toward me. Please, Dad, don't make this into something it isn't. Not tonight. That sentence cut deeper than the papers themselves. My own son, choosing peace with her over truth with me. Marla pounced on the opening. Maybe this isn't about the papers at all. Maybe it's about you struggling to let go. Dean needs freedom to build his own life. And frankly, Lowell, handling finances at your age, mistakes happen. It might be safer if Dean takes on more responsibility. The words stung like acid. My hands tightened on the edge of the table. Elaine's voice came back, steady and clear. Protect what we built. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back across the hardwood. The meal sat untouched in front of me. My voice was low but unshaken. If you think I'm powerless, you've underestimated the wrong man. Dean froze, mouth half open, but no words came. Marla smiled faintly, a smirk she didn't bother to hide. I left without another glance, the night air pressing cool against my face as the door closed behind me. Every step down that walkway carried more certainty. Their table might have rejected me, but the fight ahead was no longer about a place at dinner. It was about the future of everything Elaine and I had poured our lives into. The weight of whispers can be heavier than any insult spoken aloud. That truth settled on my shoulders the morning I walked into the grocery store on King Street. A few familiar faces from church turned away quickly, pretending to inspect produce. Others offered tight, uneasy smiles. One woman I'd known for 30 years pushed her cart down another aisle the second she saw me. At first, confusion took me. Then the dread followed, cold and steady. It didn't take long to piece it together. Marla's tongue had been busy. Her version of the dinner was already spreading like a storm front over Charleston. In her story, I wasn't a father holding his ground. I was an unstable old man, making scenes, embarrassing Dean, and dragging the family's name through the mud. That Sunday at church, the evidence grew clearer. The pastor offered me a gentle hand on the shoulder, lingering a little too long, the way people do when they think someone is slipping. The congregation's smiles were laced with pity, not respect. I sat alone in a pew that had once been crowded with friends. Elaine's absence never felt sharper. Days later, Kathy's message arrived. I didn't expect it from her. The bridesmaid with a sharp wit and a conscience that flickered when it suited her. The images she sent froze me in my chair. Cropped photographs from the engagement party, posted online. In one, Marla angled her frame just right to capture me rising from the table, cropped tight to erase her smirk and Dean's silence. The caption read, "Storming out again. Pray for Dean." The lie was crafted perfectly. No evidence of her whisper. No sign of the tension that burned through me that night. Just me, framed as the angry old man who couldn't control himself. My chest tightened as I stared. It wasn't humiliation that hit hardest. It was helplessness. A picture could be doctored, a story twisted, and suddenly a lifetime of dignity meant nothing. I called Dean. His voice sounded strained, tired, the weight of Marla's narrative already pressing down on him. "Dad, people are saying you caused a scene," he said quietly. "Dean," I answered, steadying my voice. "You were there. You know that's not what happened." A pause, long enough for me to hear his doubt. "I don't know what to think anymore. Everyone says you're angry all the time." "Maybe," he trailed off. But the silence was worse than any accusation. The line went dead. But the crack in my heart grew wider. If your own son doubts your truth, what hope is left? Marla wasn't satisfied with gossip. She wove her lies deeper. I learned she'd been meeting with some of my oldest friends, men I'd shared fishing trips and business talks with, women who'd attended Elaine's funeral. She painted me as mentally slipping, someone too old and fragile to handle finances responsibly. The poison spread. A neighbor brought over soup, not out of kindness, but out of pity, speaking slowly as if I might forget her name. At the hardware store, a clerk offered to carry my purchases to the car, even though it was only a small bag of nails. Their pity weighed more than disdain. They didn't see me anymore. They saw the portrait Marla painted, a relic to be managed, not a man to be respected. That night, I sat alone in my living room. Kathy's forwarded images still glowed on my phone screen. Dean's words echoed in my ears. The house felt emptier than ever. Elaine's photographs staring back at me from the mantel. They want me erased, I whispered into the silence. But they'll see how sharp memory can be. I opened the drawer of my desk, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside lay decades of financial records, letters Elaine had saved, and correspondence no one else knew existed, the proof of what we built, and of what could be used to defend it. My hands rested on the papers, steady now. The storm Marla had unleashed was real, but she had made a mistake. She thought erasing me would be easy. What she didn't count on was that silence can be sharper than any blade, and patience deadlier than any outburst. This battle wasn't over. The invitation arrived with a weight heavier than paper should carry. Dean called it a final attempt to mend things, though the tone in his voice told me it was anything but. I knew Marla had her fingerprints all over it. Still, something inside insisted I go. Maybe Elaine's words still echoed too loudly. Don't let them erase you. Dean's townhouse sat in Charleston's historic quarter, brick glowing with late afternoon sunlight. I walked up the steps slowly, not from age but from the heaviness of what I carried, memories, evidence, and a truth no one seemed ready to hear. Inside, the air was sharp with tension. A few relatives and friends lingered around the dining table, their conversations clipped, eyes darting toward me as if expecting the evening to erupt. Marla wasted no time. So glad you could join us. Lowell, she said, her smile brittle as glass. Her posture told everyone that she was in control, that this was her stage. Dean sat beside her, shoulders tight, eyes avoiding mine. The meal began in silence, silverware clinking like small hammers against fragile glass. I barely touched my plate. Marla, though, filled the void with her voice. It's tragic, really, she said loudly enough for all to hear. Some people just can't accept when the world moves forward. They cling to bitterness, dragging everyone else down. She didn't have to point her finger. Every glance in the room turned toward me. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. Dean cleared his throat, but no words came. The boy who once ran to me after school for advice now sat mute, shackled by the ring on Marla's finger. I set my fork down. Are you suggesting I'm sabotaging your wedding? Marla's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. I don't have to suggest it. Everyone sees it. Refusing to support your only son's future. It speaks volumes. Dean's silence hurt worse than her words. I had prepared for this. Though, my hand slipped into my jacket and pulled out folded papers, screenshots Kathy had sent me, along with the forged loan documents Eldon gave me. Before you continue, perhaps everyone should read what's been said behind my back, I said, sliding the phone across the table. On the screen, Marla's words glared. The wallet will pay. He always does. Whispers spread around the table like wildfire. Marla's face flushed crimson. For a moment, she struggled to keep her composure, but then the mask cracked. You think you can hold this family hostage with your money? She spat. Everything you've built will be Dean's, with or without your blessing. I won't let an old man's paranoia stand in the way. Her voice was shrill now, stripped of its sugary coating. Gasps filled the room. Dean looked at her as though he'd never seen her before. But still, he said nothing. That was when Travis, Dean's longtime friend who had kept mostly quiet until now, leaned forward. His voice was steady, cutting through the din. I heard you, Marla, at the bar 2 weeks ago. You bragged about getting Lowell's name off the accounts and making sure Dean wouldn't live under his father's shadow. You laughed about it. The room froze. Marla's eyes widened, fury sparking. Dean's head snapped toward Travis, shock breaking his silence for the first time. Is that true? He whispered, but Marla yanked at his sleeve, pulling him away from the question. You're all blind, she shouted, standing so abruptly her chair scraped across the floor. This man is manipulating you with his sad stories. But the conviction in her voice had faltered. Whispers swirled, Doubt spread like a crack in glass. I sat still, the evidence and testimony hanging in the air like a verdict already passed. My hands were steady, my pulse calm for the first time in months. Marla grabbed Dean's arm and stormed out, her heels clattering against the floor. The door slammed, leaving a silence so thick it pressed against the walls. I looked down at my untouched plate, then at the faces around the table, faces now split between disbelief, shame, and quiet recognition. "This is only the beginning," I murmured, mostly to myself, though a few heads turned my way. The words weren't a threat, they were a promise. The line had been drawn. For the first time, I wasn't the one retreating. The week that followed the confrontation at Dean and Marla's townhouse moved slower than any I could remember. Word traveled fast in Charleston, faster than I wanted, but not always in the direction Marla planned. At the grocery store, one woman I'd known for years squeezed my arm and whispered, "I'm so sorry. Lowell, you don't deserve this." Yet 2 aisles later, another neighbor turned her cart sharply away from mine, eyes fixed on the floor. Church on Sunday was no different. Some offered sympathetic smiles. Others gave me the kind of pitying look usually reserved for the sick or senile. Relief mingled with pain. Marla's grip was slipping, but she still had her claws in deep. By Wednesday morning, the first cracks in her perfect facade started to widen. My phone rang as I was pouring coffee, and the name on the screen made me pause. Silas Rizzo, one of the wedding vendors. His voice was strained, polite at first, but quickly sharpened. "Mr. Reichert, I need to know if you're guaranteeing these payments. We've been left with thousands in invoices, and Marla said you were backing it." The words hit like a hammer. I hadn't signed a single thing beyond the original agreement. Silas went on, frustration mounting. She added floral arches, imported wines, a live string quartet flown in from New York, all charged under your name. If the balance isn't cleared by Friday, I'm pulling my team. He wasn't the only one. Another vendor had already withdrawn. I sat in silence after he hung up, the receiver heavy in my hand. There it was, the image Marla had built, crumbling before the very people she'd relied on to keep it polished. A grim satisfaction stirred in me, but it was tempered by caution. A cornered animal was always the most dangerous. 2 days later, her counterstrike arrived. Not in whispers or photos, but in a thick envelope from a law office. My name scrawled across the front in bold ink. A tremor of unease rippling through me as I broke the seal. The letter inside was laced with venom hidden beneath legal phrasing. It suggested I was unfit to manage my financial affairs, and that, for the sake of stability, Dean should assume control. It was a carefully worded attempt to strip me of my independence. Anger surged hot in my chest, but beneath it came resolve. I spread the documents across my dining table, jotting notes in the margins. Every transaction, every screenshot, every voicemail would be cataloged. Elaine's words echoed in my mind. "Protect what we built." I whispered into the stillness of the house. "Not one penny leaves my hands without a fight." That night, Dean showed up at my door. His shoulders slumped, tie loosened, eyes weary. He barely looked older than the boy who used to ride his bike up and down our street, yet the weight of Marla's world was etched deep into his face. "Dad," he said quietly, stepping into the kitchen, "please, just don't make this worse. People are saying you're fighting everyone." I looked at him, a mixture of sorrow and steel in my voice. "The truth doesn't make things worse, Dean. Lies do. You know me. You know your mother. Does any of this sound like us?" His jaw worked, but no words followed. He just rubbed his forehead and shook his head, retreating into silence before leaving as quickly as he'd arrived. Later, as the house settled into its nightly creaks, I sorted through the growing stack of evidence. Papers rustled under my hands, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the desk. On the counter nearby, my phone buzzed. I pressed play without thinking, and Elaine's voice filled the room again, her message recorded years ago. "Lowell, promise me you'll protect what we built, no matter who stands against you." The sound of her voice brought a burn to my eyes, but also a strength I thought I'd lost. The grief that had weighed me down shifted, hardening into something sharper, steadier. "You were right, Elaine," I murmured. "It's time to fight with everything I've got." In that moment, the decision was made. Marla had dragged me from whispers and smirks into the public square. Now I would bring her schemes into the light she feared most. The courthouse in Charleston smelled faintly of polish and old wood. Walking through its tall doors, clutching a folder of carefully ordered documents, the weight of everything behind me pressed heavy but steady. Marla arrived just minutes later, heels sharp against the marble floor, her lawyer close behind. She wore that same smug expression, the kind that fed off confidence she thought was unshakable. The judge postponed formal rulings, but the air in that courtroom spoke louder than any gavel. No one looked at me like I was frail. They looked at me like a man who had shown up, prepared, unwilling to bow his head. Fear tugged in my chest, but discipline kept it still. Weeks passed after that hearing, and in small ways, the tide began to shift. At church, people who once averted their eyes now greeted me warmly again. Neighbors left casseroles at my doorstep. Old friends pulled me aside with words of encouragement. The whispers had changed direction, turning against Marla. Stories of her manipulations spread, unraveling the image she worked so hard to maintain. Dean noticed. His shoulders carried more weight each time we met. His voice sounded thin when he spoke, caught between loyalty to his fiancée and the truth staring back at him from every corner of the community. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes, not toward me, but toward her. The real blow came from the vendors. Silas called me first, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm done chasing her. Others are too. We're filing official complaints. If the wedding happens, it won't be on her terms anymore." Complaints stacked up, bills unpaid, promises broken. What was once her spotless reputation began collapsing in plain sight. Satisfaction burned low in my chest, not from vengeance, but from justice finding a foothold at last. Dean came to my home one night, his face drawn and tense. "You've turned everyone against her," he accused, voice trembling. "She's under attack because of you." I sat steady at my kitchen table, hands folded, voice calm. "The truth doesn't need my help, son. It reveals itself, sooner or later." He stormed out, the sound of his car fading down the quiet Charleston street. Anguish tore through me, the kind only a father can feel, love tangled with betrayal. Patience pressed to its breaking point. Later that evening, an envelope slid under my front door. No return address, just my name scrawled in black ink. Inside were photographs. Marla seated at a bank table, leaning close to another man, papers spread between them. One caption in a neat, unfamiliar hand read, "Documents Dean doesn't need to see." My grip tightened on the photos. A rush of shock gave way to something sharper, colder, proof, clearer than whispers, stronger than forged signatures. Evidence that her schemes reached deeper than Dean could ever deny. I placed the photos on my desk, next to Elaine's voicemail I'd kept alive on my phone. "You were right," I whispered into the quiet room. "It's time." The tide was turning. And this time, it wouldn't just be words against words. The envelope sat heavy in my hand, but not as heavy as the letter I opened that morning. The courthouse seal was stamped at the top. The kind of official mark you don't ignore. My eyes scanned the words, each one a blow. My own son had filed a petition to take control of my finances. The reasoning was plain and brutal. Declining judgment. Risk of exploitation. In need of protection. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me, coffee untouched. Betrayal has a sound, and it isn't loud. It's the quiet scrape of a chair where someone used to sit. The silence on the other end of a phone line. This was my son's handwriting on the signature line, my son's choice to declare me incapable. Marla's influence was all over it, but that didn't soften the sting. By the time the hearing day came, I walked into the Charleston courthouse carrying nothing but a folder of papers and what remained of my dignity. The air was cold. the kind of institutional chill that seeps into your bones. Across the aisle sat Dean, shoulders hunched, avoiding my eyes. Marla whispering into his ear like a stage director feeding lines. She had that same smug look I'd seen at the engagement party, the confidence of someone who thinks the game is already won. When the judge asked who wished to speak, Dean cleared his throat. His voice was low, but steady. I believe my father needs help making decisions. I'm asking to assume responsibility for his finances, for his protection. The words hit harder than any insult Marla had ever thrown. My son, my blood, speaking in open court as if I were already gone. I kept my face still, my voice silent. Sometimes silence is the only shield you have. Back home, the courthouse walls still echoing in my ears. I spread everything across my desk, the photographs of Marla at the bank, the forged loan documents, the group chat screenshots Kathy had slipped me. One by one, I laid them out, pairing them like puzzle pieces. Together, they painted a picture far uglier than any accusation against me. The shame of the courtroom was still raw, but something else stirred deeper, determination. If they wanted a fight, I would not come empty-handed. While searching for more papers, I stumbled on an old shoebox tucked in the corner of the closet. Inside were mementos of Elaine, her handwriting on grocery lists, a church program folded in half, and a small recorder I'd nearly forgotten. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, warm and steady, even after all these years. If they ever try to take what you've built, remember, truth always has allies, even if hidden. For a moment, grief crushed me. I sat there with my head in my hands, the weight of her absence pressing down. But as her words echoed, that grief hardened into something sharper. She had known me, known the battles I would face. Even if she hadn't known the shape they'd take, she had trusted I would rise to them. I set the recorder on top of the evidence stack. My hand no longer shook. I whispered into the quiet house, "You won't erase me, Marla, and Dean. You will see her for what she is, even if it breaks you." The folder was thick now, undeniable. The fight ahead would not be just about money. It would be about my name, my memory, my dignity. And with Elaine's voice guiding me, I would not walk into that storm unarmed. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, like every decision ever made still lingered in the walls. Marla sat straight-backed, her lawyer shuffling papers, while Dean read from a statement about concern for my father's judgment. The words cut deep, not because of their power, but because of the mouth they came from. Every syllable, every nervous glance at her, only confirmed how tightly he was bound to her will. My breath stayed even, my hands steady. But beneath the calm, humiliation pressed hard against the ribs. When the judge called for exhibits, I stood, my folder heavier than its weight in paper. I laid out vendor contracts, Silas's invoices, Eldon's letter describing the bridge loan Marla had tried to wrangle from my accounts. Kathy's photos followed, unedited, showing me seated quietly, respectful, not the storming out villain painted online. And then Travis spoke, voice clear, recounting how he'd overheard Marla boasting about moving money in my name. The crack came when Eldon himself, summoned by affidavit, confirmed Marla's visit to the bank the very morning after the engagement party. Forged initials, documents slid across his desk, her charm wrapping around lies. The courtroom shifted, air tightening. Vindication flickered not as joy, but as fire. Righteous. Steady. Marla's lawyer attacked hard, claiming the chain of custody was weak. I answered with dates, metadata, call logs I'd saved on an old flip phone. One by one, pieces held. Silas called in, his voice bitter but firm, confirming he'd been pressured to accept a bride's substitute payer. And then the judge turned to Dean. "Did you authorize access to your father's accounts?" Dean hesitated. Too long. His shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked at her not as savior but as predator. The ruling came sharp. Petition denied with prejudice. Possible forgery referred to investigators. The judge's voice turned to Dean. "Recklessly influenced," she called it, her tone part warning, part mercy. I caught the words, but my eyes were fixed on Marla. Her phone buzzed. She read a text, smirked. "Next time we do the POA first," it said. Dean saw it too, his face drained. In the corridor, her voice slithered. "This isn't over." But Dean was no longer deaf. He asked her for the ring. She clutched it, refused. His answer was simple. "Keep it. It's the last thing of mine you'll ever hold." On the courthouse steps, he faced me, for once. No rehearsed lines, no defensive shell, just a man torn open. "I thought guardianship would protect you from yourself. I didn't see it was her plan I was protecting." His voice broke on the word father. He withdrew the petition, signed papers to prevent any future claim, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't open my arms. Not yet. Trust isn't a door. It's scaffolding, rebuilt plank by plank. "It'll take time," I said. He nodded, eyes wet but steady. By dusk, I was on my porch, shrimp boats humming past the harbor, a sound older than every lie we'd faced. Elaine's second voicemail played once more, her voice strong. "If they ever try to take what you've built, remember, truth always has allies, even if hidden." I locked the recorder away in a fireproof box, beside my new trust documents. My estate plan sealed like armor. To anyone listening, love your children, but notarize your boundaries. Keep records. Don't apologize for guarding your name. Protection is not paranoia, it's love with paperwork. I sent Dean a text. "Supper Friday. One rule, no lies." His reply came fast. "I'll bring the cornbread." The porch light clicked off, not in fear, but because sunrise knows its way.